The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
And I'm here to bring you the truth. No one else is telling you the things that God is telling you through me. He's speaking through me.
The Lord let me experience what it is to be a new bride. You know, I'm not worried about what I'm about to say, though it may be graphic. We're coming to the Lord, and if you can take it, beyond the veil is the chamber. That's the wedding chamber. The Lord told me that.
But from then on, visions begin to come. When this comes up on me, it produces a vision. I'm able to tell people what's wrong with them, what they must do in life, and the sins that they are holding back in their life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. I am Matty Lassiter. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to remind everyone, as always, go and follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We also have a new way that you can connect with us. We're actually really excited about. You can leave us a voice message with a question or a comment, or if you just want to rant about something, you can do that too, and we may feature it on the show. You can find that link on our Instagram bio, or what's probably easier is that you can find the link at the top of the description of the episode that you're listening to or watching right now. So if you're on Apple or Spotify or another audio service, you'll find that link at the very top. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find that at the top of the description there as well. It's a super easy little link to use. It has a little record button. You can record your message. You can listen back, make sure that you don't hate it, just like old school voicemail. And then you can send that to us and we'll be able to download that and we may feature it on the show. So we're excited to hear from most of you, not all of you, but most of you. Also want to do our double portion club shout outs real quick. We have Shanda and Chase. Sometimes I would say Chase and Shanda. We're going to fight the patriarchy. We're going to go Shanda and Chase for today. Thank you both for supporting the podcast. Also Heather Bartlett and then Carla. Thank all of you for supporting the podcast. It means a lot to Ashley and I, and we're very grateful for you. If you want to be in that exclusive club, it's only $10 a month. You get ad-free episodes and the shout out, as well as a sticker I'll send to you. And then if you want to do a $5 a month to support the work, you'll get ad-free episodes and we'll send you the cool holographic sticker. Just no shout out for the $5 people. Sorry, rules are rules. All right. And lastly, I want to read a quick review. This is from Smiley Netta. And this says, I have not experienced all the same traumas of the host, but many experiences and feelings resonate deeply with me. I am grateful to feel less alone while I unpack growing up in high control religion. Thank you. No, thank you very much for that review. And I'm glad that the podcast has had a positive impact to you and has been meaningful for you. And we're very, very grateful for that and to hear from people, on a regular basis that it's helpful to them. Okay, so today's episode, we've got our final episode for now with Naomi Wright. We actually had her talk a little bit about Crusade Church and the information that she has about that and the direction that Crusade Church was headed and kind of looking at that through the lens of what she experienced in her father's cult. And if you've listened to the previous two episodes, you'll get why that would make sense, that she could have some insight there. So she kind of looked at that from a different angle than maybe we could or most people could, and kind of highlight some of the differences and some of the similarities there. So let's take a listen.
Okay, so you've listened to our podcast from the beginning, so you kind of know the evolution of our family's progression from one cult to another, and our dad starting his own cult, and then several years in turning to this love move where he was encouraging, touching and hugging and intimacy between members. And I know it was a question on everyone's mind when I first reconnected with the family, like what was going on? Why was he doing this? Where was this going? And I know that you have some thoughts on that and I thought I would love to hear those.
They made it through the grapevine.
and your thoughts are that it was totally normal and nothing weird was going to happen, right?
Just genuine love.
Yeah, it's real.
Of a non-platonic kind, though.
Really?
Something I've actually wanted to ask you too, because I'm just curious, now that that's happened, like, kind of the climax of the situation, are you guys, like, similarly to how I've looked back and been able to connect previous things, have you guys had that experience? Like, was it really totally out of nowhere? Like, did this really, like, kind of just pop up, this love cult aspect of it, love moved aspect? Or, like, I know you shared, Ashley, and I'm not asking for specifics, but, like, how you had, like, you can think of some moments similarly to me where you're like, oh, that just felt off, or that felt, I guess I'm just wondering, like, I look back and I can see, no, there were some indicators along the way that just weren't big enough to blow it up for me yet.
What do you think?
I don't think I have to the extent of what you were talking about in yours.
Sure.
I think most of my the work that I've done thinking about it has been more, it's not old stuff. It's more trying to understand, like, why did this happen when it happened? Not really like what were the hints further back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we've talked about it a little bit, like, Dad giving that message, however longer, before the love move where he was clearly dissatisfied, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to figure out, like, okay, what was the trigger that made this happen when it did, but not so much kind of hints. I don't think I've done enough of that work yet within myself.
And for me, just because the dad that I knew, that I grew up with, was not that. Like, I remember him doing piano lessons for some girls, and he would always have me or my mom in the room, and he said it's because, you didn't want to give the appearance of evil, and, like, that was like a protective thing for him in case he were ever to be accused of something. And so to hear that is the direction that they started going in was wild to me. I was like, what happened? And just based on what all of you have said, I just think it may just literally come down to he had an attraction for this person. He wanted her, and he figured out a way to manipulate scripture to bring everybody else on board and make this something almost like everybody's doing it. We're all doing this thing. And then it doesn't look weird that he's doing it. But I firmly believe that this was a trajectory. I don't think you guys, like, hit home base. I think it was still happening, and where that would have gone, like, I can only guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was heading towards religious orgies.
Yes.
Is like, I mean, that's what it sounds like. And so, yeah, I think similarly to how it's taken me longer than maybe others who would have asked me questions about my story to be like, okay, yeah, like, no, my dad was a pedophile. He was, to be able to really, like, grasp those things and then to be able to say them. I think we have those additional challenges when it's our own story. And so as I've followed along and listened to the podcast and had conversations, for me, having the lens that I have from what my experiences are, it sounds like it's not a hop, skip, and a jump. Like, they're just holding hands. I mean, it's so similar in the motivation, it sounds like, as well as in, like you just shared, Ashley, that, like, we're going to make this a movement. Like, we're going to make this okay for everyone. This isn't just going to be like an affair behind closed doors. Like, no, I've got enough power and control to be able to head this in a direction where I can just outright do whatever I want to do. And where it would go from there, I mean, I have a hard time believing it would have stopped with one woman, because this wasn't like him. And my dad took many wives, so he didn't stop for him at like one or two women either. But this it wasn't taking a wife either. And again, he still could have taken more. It was just more of this openness, like this just, being called love. But I think it really was more about sexual openness. And which we're not talking about that. I'm like, well, that would be a whole separate conversation. Like, I'm not saying like there can't be, I'm saying in this environment of what's happening, like this is so wrong. And overt lies to cover up for, which I think again is just further evidence that he had an end goal. Like similar to my dad, when I hear about your dad, there's that similarity of they both wanted something. And they were going to use the power and influence that they had and the control they had over others to make sure that they got it. And just like my dad then said other men could do the same, your dad was saying we can all do the same. And so it's not just exclusive. It's not just for me. Maybe that would raise more flags or cause more issues. And it's being painted in this. Again, it's not the stories that you've shared about like what the love move actually looked like that's not actually like appropriate fondness being shown between parties, like in any kind of environment. Like there isn't heavy petting and sitting on laps and all of this stuff going on. It's not just like in a church, it's weird. It's like, it's just weird.
Yeah.
Anywhere. Like it's just weird. And so go ahead.
Yeah. It's not love. It's almost like, the approximation of what somebody who doesn't know what love is looks like. Because when I look back on it now, it's like, well, yeah, that's all you think of it as.
Yeah.
Heavy petting and getting weird, not actual love, what you call it, the love move. So it's interesting to look at it now from that lens.
Well, there are groups too. I've come alongside some people who have come out of groups where they take like Jesus is the groom and the church is the bride, and they make it very literal, and it is sexualized. And so they are being sexually intimate with themselves or with others and believing it's like with Jesus. And so this whole thing gets sexualized. And that sounds very similar as well.
It really does.
Like where this was heading. I don't recall to what extent Jesus and bride and groom, like if any of that was at play. Like I remember,
heavily.
right?
Oh, yeah.
At least some of it.
Yeah.
And so just I could just see within as little as like months where there would have been like actual sexual activity like happening in the sanctuary and saying this is us being intimate with our God and this is okay and this is pro tip for anyone who wants to be a cult leader, you can't move that fast. And I think that was where your dad dropped the ball. Like he got too he was chomping at the bit too much for what he wanted, and he moved it way too a few months or something, wasn't it? Like it escalated fast. So like followers can't keep up at that kind of speed. I'm glad he did it too fast because it all dismantled. So I'm so glad that happened. I don't think it would have been caught in the same way had it been more slow. But had it worked at that pace, I don't see how it would have been more than another like 6 months before it would have been just full blown religious orgies. Like I don't even know what the technical term.
Yeah. And COVID. I mean, if COVID hadn't happened, I don't know how that would have gone. But it is kind of amazing that he pushed that so hard, and our mom was struggling so much with that. And he didn't even try to finesse that situation at all. It was just like, this is what's happening. And I always wondered if he just is relying on the belief that everyone had that he is God's prophet. He's receiving these revelations from God, which I was going to ask you, when your dad was coming up with revelations or new beliefs or whatever it was, how was he receiving that?
From God.
Like dreams or like visions
or direct.
Yeah.
He had some were dreams. Some though weren't. I wouldn't say my memory is, I don't think they were predominantly dreams. It was more like Brenham, where Brenham would claim to just like be hearing, like he would just know. It was more of this just like knowing.
Like and God then, sent me this.
Yeah, like I just know, like I'm receiving a message. It never happened like in the moment like that, but that kind of idea. And so it was more of, yes, like in prayer, in reading God's word, or in like, I just know that this is it. So he didn't even have to work that hard to like have dreams or make up dreams, or it could just be like what he thought and then just claim that thought came from God.
I think Dad kind of did all of it.
Yeah, I was going to say with Dad, especially towards the end, the love move part, like he would be in a conversation. Not that this happened often with me or anything, but I saw this happen. He'd be in conversation with somebody and then like stop them and like do this kind of thing, like close his eyes and put his head back and say like, the Lord's speaking to me right now, stuff.
Sorry.
And then after 5 minutes or whatever, then, recount what the Lord had told him about whatever that was.
But this also goes back, I think, to that performative aspect, is that he loved attention. I mean, that's like, without it, like he's nothing.
Right.
And that is like everything to him, which goes back to this woman that he was getting involved with. I don't know which came first. He wanted to be with someone else, or she's giving him the attention, and then that turns into, I want to be with her. But she was definitely feeding him narcissistic supply big time.
Oh, she was literally feeding him as well.
Well, yeah, remember correctly. She was literally feeding him.
She was feeding him supply and soup.
Well, and some of that, she's the one who has to nurse him. My heart just breaks for your mom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I can't.
How awful. And I think of my mom too, of course, with like all the other women. It's just, people are so selfish sometimes.
Yeah. And that, like, you were talking about your dad having genuine emotion, and you could tell, like, sometimes that was coming from a place really deep. I feel like we saw a dad do that as well. It really can mess with your head and confuse you when it's just no one. I just always came out of this saying, like, no one is all good or all bad. I mean, he did horrible things, but I know there were human moments, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it just makes it hard.
Yeah. And I agree. I have agreed for a long time with what you're saying of like, people aren't all good or all bad. I do believe at this point, though, people can very heavily lean in one direction or the other.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's something like I didn't, I was more like, no, it just felt more like a mixed, a little bit more balanced, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's really not. Like, it's not for him. Like, it's really heavily bad. I mean, you have to dig. Like, I have to dig hard to find the goodness, because even there can be so much bad that the stuff that is more good, again, it's called into question. Like, was that self-serving? I mean, was that even genuine? I mean, what do I do with it? I have all this evidence of all these other things that weren't. And so I'm kind of at a point, I think, right now in my own, like, kind of making sense again with having newer information come out of, man, I think there were some genuine moments. Like, there's this picture of my dad, like, holding me when I was 2 and dancing with me till I fell asleep. And he wrote this really sweet poem about it, and he actually kept it in his Bible. I think that was genuine when I was that little. Like, I think that was for real. But what plans did he have for me? I don't know. Like, it still like begs some questions. But yeah, when I look at or think about the story of your dad's trajectory, I think that what throws me about it, and it shouldn't, like, I get it. People have affairs at certain stages of life, or there's a specific person that catches their attention. And it just seems like he had made it so long without letting that in. How old was he?
He is 70 right now.
So he was 60, whatever, mid-60s.
So it just seems like, gosh, he made it so far without something like that. It's just, why now? But he did also have that power and that control that had been built up. And so then it just spirals of, well, now I want this. And people get cocky and they think they can get it. And then they can get sloppy. It's like people who have They say that about criminals, like, oh, they'll get sloppy after a while because they'll get too confident. And I think there's a similarity.
I think
that I
that's
see there.
exactly it. Because in the Worldwide Church of God, he believed that Herbert Armstrong was, God's spokesperson, basically, and the leader of the one true church. And I think it was enough for him at that time in his life to just know that he was, quote unquote, called by God, and that he was part of the group that God had specifically chosen for this time. And that was good enough for him. And he fell in line and he followed the rules and he was doing all the things that you were supposed to do. I definitely noticed a change when the church split and we started hosting services at our home, because it was our home and that was like his domain. And then we were one of the first families to leave the Worldwide Church of God. So as other families trickled out, they were coming to him, as you would do, just like, oh, now I see this. And so they're just talking to the wee hours of the morning. And so I think he kind of assumed a bit of a leadership role in that and felt a little bit possessive of the group that was meeting at our house every weekend. And we were just playing video sermons from the headquarters of Global Church of God. But then when the church grew big enough, they're like, oh, we have a minister for you now that's going to be coming twice a month or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And that was just right from the get-go not received well at all. I remember him quabbling about the time of services and saying, they were changing, that the new minister was having to go to several different towns to give sermons on Saturdays. And so we had to move our service. I don't remember what we moved it to. Dad made a huge deal out of that. And even though I was like lockstep with him at the moment, I still thought, why is this such a thing? I just felt like he was trying to find any way that he could control the situation. And then, this minister came in. I thought he was nice, but Dad had a million bad things to say about him, and so it just kind of, Dad was able to justify, well, we're just going to have to have our own group, and so he justified that, saying, that they were too controlling, and which is just so funny. And so I kind of think that is how it all started with him, just tasting a bit of power and then realizing he likes it and he likes the people, and then just went from there. I think if Worldwide had never split, he would just still be, that's my personal opinion, he would just still be there.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but like you said, he got that taste for it and saw that people followed, right? I mean, when he then started his own, it wasn't just immediate family, right? There were other people who...
Right, and he was so, the one thing about him is he is very convincing. You can't win an argument with him. It doesn't matter what it is. He can be arguing the sky is green. He's going to come out on top. It doesn't matter. You can both be standing up there looking at it. He's so convincing. And so I think he had everyone's ear, because we would just talk all day Saturday and into Saturday night. And so I think he was able to convince a lot of the people in the group that this was something that had to happen. We had to separate ourselves. And yeah, I think that.
I do think he had, maybe this is giving him too much benefit of the doubt, I don't know, but had I guess his first task was the self-delusion part. Because I guess this is where the benefit of the doubt part comes in. I feel like he always had to feel like what he was saying or doing was genuine and right. Like I never got the sense from Dad that he was conniving or scheming and knew it, at least to the point that he knew, like, I'm manipulating this person and it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've talked to my brother Michael about this. Like, Michael thinks that Dad did know he was manipulating, and he's probably right, but thought he was right to do it, if that makes sense. So it's like, I always had that sense from Dad, like, he has to think he's genuine and right, which is interesting to me, which I know with a lot of others that maybe is not the case, that they kind of know. They're just angling to get what they want.
Right.
I think he was, but he still had to, like, make it where he was really right in his mind somehow.
Yeah. The self-delusion is a huge piece of this. I mean, we've debated it. I think he really believes that he is being persecuted right now. And that he is God's servant on earth. I don't know how
Job.
Yeah.
I think he thinks of himself in that vein right now. That's the impression that I've gotten.
Well, similar to your dad saying, I'm going to be going away for a time. You know, he was just like, I've had a vision. I'm going to be all alone. Everyone's going to leave me. And so when all this happened, it's like, well, yep, there's the prophecy fulfilled. Everyone has left me. So, you know, there's no reaching out to any of us or like.
Right. Which could also set him up to then have other people join him in the future because they would feel bad and be like, wow, you know, he really was right. I mean, it kind of gives him a next step if he wants and if it would be effective. And I see that too for both, where they were just like keeping the door open, whether totally intentionally in a calculated way or not, I don't know, but it does keep the door open. I mean, it kept, in my family, people in the same place waiting for him, living the same lifestyles. I mean, I heard of, this was probably like 5+ years ago now, but he had been a kid. Now he's like in his 40s, but someone I grew up with, he had really wanted to be a medical doctor and was like mid-30s, upper 30s at that point, and still like working in a grocery store or something because he was still waiting. Like, just lives just totally wasted. It's so sad. So, I mean, these beliefs, I mean, they run deep. And I think, again, like a difference in your story is how it just came on so quick and it changed. I mean, and that was able to raise flags for people.
Yeah, and a lot of that was tied to our mom's pain. I think if Mom had been more accepting, I'm not really sure, you know, how that might have impacted the rest of the siblings.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, if she had just that, I mean, gosh, I would agree with that for myself. Like, had my mom not been the person, you know, played that role that she did of like trying to make it okay and trying to, you know, keep peace with the other women and I don't know if I would have thought of it in the same way growing up.
Right.
If I had, I mean, maybe. I mean, I have sisters from the other moms who still, I guess, thought, I don't know. I mean, if they would still hold that belief of like they had thought it was right. I don't, as far as I know, polygamy is not being practiced anymore by the group that continues. So, I mean, that makes me think that they did retire that anyway. I don't know that they would actually speak badly of it. I'm not sure if anyone would take it that far. But yeah, that is interesting. Like, had my mom not said that. And my dad also said things like, if everyone's actually, there's always these like bombs, right? That just make everyone wrong if they don't agree with him. And it was, if everyone is right with God, then they will be good with this and it will go well and it will be. So then it was, so whenever there would be, you know, dissension, I always thought, well, they're not right with God. You know, that's why. So then you get all judgy and so, yeah, like all these like nets, you know, so that you catch every potential disbelief or every potential like pushback that you can get.
See, it's things like that, which is obviously extremely familiar, almost verbatim, that I've heard But it's things like that make you think, at least make me think, well, maybe I'm wrong about that benefit of the doubt thing. Like when you hear that, it's like, well, it seems like they kind of know what they're doing. Like they're setting the stage, like people aren't going to be cool with this thing. So I'm just going to tell you right up front, like if you're not, something's wrong with you type thing. Like we heard that so often, especially at the end, but yeah, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
Like to try to think through, like, I don't know, like you've said, like people aren't all one thing, but man,
it's
trying to figure them out.
It's so interesting how like cult leaders all have certain similarities and things in common. And you're just like, they're not all reading this handbook on how to start a cult and operate one. So why do they all fall into the same similar patterns? It's just, and I think before talking to you, I just kind of thought, is this just part of the pathology of narcissism? You know, like, I don't know, like when it's that extreme and you just want power at all costs, is this just like kind of what happens? And that's why there's so many similarities. But I don't know.
I mean, there's some stories that I've looked at, including my own, where I'm like, NPD might be this might be a psychopath. Like we might have something different even going on. And I've wondered about that as well. I'm like, there might be more aspects to what's happening. So, yeah, there are these common denominators. And I hear what you're saying. If it's not calculated, if none of it is an intentional tactic being used, like, how are all these people genuinely saying the same stuff?
Is it just like a natural law somehow?
Yeah,
it's just like water erodes and these guys do all the same thing. Like, it's hard to figure it out.
And yet, I am so glad that none of us fully understand the headspace of a cult leader, because then we'd probably be them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I am thankful that I can't totally get it.
Sorry, Ryan. You're not going to get what you need from this.
My son. So both of his grandfathers, like his dad, my ex-husband's dad, was a longtime pastor in LCG, and he grew up in it. Like he was literally born in LCG, and then our dad. So my son's like, so both of my grandfathers are like somewhat cult leaders. Like dad was definitely one, and Carl was part of one, but
we don't think it's genetic.
I know. He was like, it's my destiny. I'm gonna have to run a cult.
Oh my goodness. Well, again, pro tip, don't move too fast. With your launch, you're gonna have delayed gratification or followers will catch on.
Boil the frog and then like slowly elevating temperatures.
Oh man, that's going to be your spinoff podcast. How to be a cult leader.
Well, Dad had this whole thing about this demon named Pretense that he was going to fight on Mount Nebo, and it was this whole showdown thing. And so my son is he's a digital storytelling major at Mizzou. And he loves videography, and he wants to create a documentary where he's like searching for Pretense Mount Nebo. It's like a joke.
I want to be on the crew.
You want to help him.
That's
He's like, I have to avenge like for my grandfather to find Pretense.
Oh, that's so good. And being able to laugh about it is so healthy.
Yeah. You kind of have to at some point. I feel like I spent a lot of years crying about it. So, yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. This was so great.
Oh, gosh. Absolutely. It was fun. At the same time, it's like fun and kind of like,
I know.
It's a mix.
Yeah, it's always hard after these to be like, that was a fun talk. Like, but...
No, you two are enjoyable people to have a crappy conversation with. How's that?
Wow. Can you write that out? We will share that review.
That's a testimony.
That's the best compliment I've had maybe ever.
Oh, man.
Aside from that, we're mostly okay or whatever it was.
That's a good, yeah.
Someone said you're mostly okay.
Yeah, we had a 1-star review.
We were I want a shirt that says mostly okay podcasters.
Yeah. Mostly okay and interesting or something like that. Yeah, we had a 1-star review or somebody.
Well, mostly okay should be more than 1. That would be not okay at all.
Yeah, I guess. But there's no lower. You can't do 0
Right?
stars. They probably would have.
Mostly okay should
But
get
shout
something.
out to you, whoever you are. I don't remember who it was. But I hope you're still listening.
To our mostly okay
Yeah. Oh, man. If you like this episode, please go leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever that is. If it's Apple, Spotify, or another service, it's really helpful. And don't forget to subscribe so that you can get notified when we have new episodes and updates and things like that. Thanks, and we'll talk to you all again next week.